Dissecting the steel core of America's power. It is not found in the thick asphalt-like oil wells of Caracas. It is found in the dancing numbers inside the SWIFT system, and the privilege of printing the dollar without limit. But there is a question that any clear-headed person must ask. If that dollar throne matters that much, has anyone ever dared to lay a hand on it, and what became of them, of us? Today we will not talk about the present. We will swim back upstream through time to meet the ghosts, those who once ruled a region, those who once possessed mighty armies and seemingly endless resources, yet ultimately ended their lives in cramped hideouts or in bitter, humiliating deaths. Saddam Hussein of Iraq and Gaddafi of Libya did not die simply because they were tyrants. This world is not short of tyrants. Some are still being warmly shaken hands with by Washington. They died because they committed an unforgivable sin. Under the silent code of the global financial mafia, they tried to sell oil without using the US dollar. Welcome to the darkest chapter of modern geopolitics. A curse reserved for those who dare to break ranks. Welcome to Inner Shadow, where there are truths society does not want you to know. The fog called weapons of mass destruction and the death of Saddam Hussein. Let's go back to 2003. The whole world held its breath as US cruise missiles rained down on Baghdad, the capital of Iraq. The reason broadcast across every mainstream headline at the time was that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction. It sounds noble, doesn't it? Very humanitarian, protecting world peace. But 20 years later, after the smoke cleared and the ruins grew moss, what did people find? Not a single kilogram of chemical weapons. Not a trace of nuclear capability. So why was the US willing to spend billions of dollars, kill countless people, trade in the blood of so many lives, mobilize hundreds of thousands of troops, and pay in the blood of American soldiers just to topple someone they knew clearly had no fangs? The answer lies in an event 3 years earlier, in November 2000. At that time, Saddam Hussein, a leader both arrogant and extremely pragmatic, made a decision that amounted to geopolitical suicide. He declared Iraq would no longer accept US dollars in exchange for oil. Instead, Iraq would sell oil in euros. To an ordinary person, that sounds like nothing more than switching currencies, right? But to Washington, it was a direct declaration of war on the petrodollar system. Imagine if Iraq, a country with enormous oil reserves, successfully switched to the euro. Other OPEC nations would see a path to escape America's grip. Global demand for dollars would drop, and America's money printing machine would begin to stutter, because the need to hoard dollars and the number of countries forced to use the dollar as a reserve currency would shrink dramatically. And the US could not allow Saddam Hussein to survive long enough to prove that the world can function without USD. Saddam Hussein's death on the gallows in 2006 was not the execution of justice for the Iraqi people. It was a blood message sent to the entire Arab world: the oil may be yours, but the unit that prices it must be ours. Whoever dares to change the rules of the game must be destroyed. The dream of the gold. Dinar and the death sentence for Gaddafi. If Saddam Hussein was a rule breaker by choosing another strong currency, then Gaddafi of Libya went one step further. He wanted to create an entirely new set of rules. Gaddafi was not an ordinary politician. He was a dangerously ambitious dreamer. He understood that whether it was the US dollar or the euro, Africa and the Arab world would remain slaves to the Western financial system. So what was his dream? A United States of Africa with a single shared currency called the gold dinar. Gaddafi wanted to use Libya's 143 tons of gold reserves to back a new currency. He called on Islamic and African countries to unite to use gold to pay for oil instead of America's worthless green paper. Pause for a moment and think about how terrifying that idea is to Washington. A currency truly backed by gold, used by a bloc that holds much of the planet's resources. This is not merely breaking ranks. This is building a brand new financial fortress, directly threatening and completely collapsing the dollar's monopolistic position. So what happened? In 2011, under the banner of protecting civilians amid the Arab Spring, NATO intervened militarily in Libya. Hillary Clinton, then the US Secretary of State, smiled brightly on television when she heard Gaddafi had been killed. "We came, we saw, and he died." Later declassified emails from Clinton's own office confirmed a brutal truth. The real reason for the intervention in Libya was not democracy, it was fear that Gaddafi's gold dinar would weaken France's power in Africa and threaten the stability of the Western financial system. Libya, once the African country with the highest living standards, a country with no foreign debt, was thrown into a black hole of civil war, poverty, and chaos. That was the price of daring to dream of independent finance. Venezuela and Maduro. The heir or the next victim. Now look at Venezuela today. When you see Nicolas Maduro prosecuted by the US as a drug criminal, when you see the US placing a $50 million bounty on his head, wake up for a moment. Does the US truly care about fighting drugs? If they cared, why do their allies in Latin America, where massive drug trafficking corridors feed directly into the US, still receive steady military aid? Venezuela has committed the same crime in quotation marks as Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi. Under suffocating sanctions, Maduro did what Washington fears most. First, he accepted oil payments in China's renminbi. Second, he established direct oil for gold swap channels with Iran and Russia. Third, he intended to launch the petro-digital currency to bypass the squid system. Maduro is trying to prove to the world that America's operating system can be hacked, and that is precisely why Washington cannot sit still. They cannot allow Venezuela to become a second Iraq or a second Libya through a direct military invasion, because the global context has changed. Instead, they are using a kind of financial biological weapon to choke the country from the inside. America's arrest of Maduro and his wife, the freezing of all his foreign assets, and the recognition of an interim government. These are all steps in a campaign called the Journey of a Rebel. Mafia logic. Why the strong never forgive? Why does the strong never forgive? Why must America be so ruthless? Why can't they allow smaller countries like Venezuela or Libya to decide their own financial destiny? The answer lies in the nature of belief. The USD system is not backed by gold. It is backed by faith. The faith that USD is the only thing you can use to buy energy. If even a small loophole appears, if a country dares to break ranks successfully without being punished, the whole world will realize the dollar god is nothing but a clay giant. If back then Saddam Hussein had succeeded with the euro, if Gaddafi had succeeded with the gold dinar, if Maduro succeeds with the renminbi or petro, then the US loses its power to impose a global tax. It cannot print money to pay for aircraft carrier fleets. It must confront its own $38,000 billion debt. That is an existential collapse. So for Washington, overthrowing rebels is not an option. It is a survival instinct. We are living in a very strange moment in history. Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi fell in isolation because at the time, America was the only unipolar superpower. But Maduro today is different, because behind him are not only ruined oil fields, but also alliances rising with Russia and China powers, also seeking to break the USD chains. The petrol curse has worked for half a century. It has erased dynasties and turned prosperous cities into rubble. But this time in Venezuela, the conflict looks more complicated than ever. The ghosts of Saddam and Gaddafi leave us with a chilling truth in geopolitics. There is no right or wrong, no good or evil, only those who obey the rules and those who dare to challenge them. Venezuela may be the next victim of the curse, or it may be the first crack that signals the collapse of a monetary empire. And whatever the outcome, remember this when you hear sermons about democracy or human rights from great powers. Look toward the oil wells and the money flows. Only there will you see the real face of power. The Dark Alliance. When Venezuela becomes an empire laboratory, why has Maduro not fallen yet? The answer is not the strength of Venezuela's military. The answer is that on this chessboard, Maduro does not seem to be playing alone. Behind him stands the shadow of two giants, hungry to overturn America's unipolar order, Russia and China. In the later part of this podcast episode, we will dissect a truth. Western media always tries to hide. Venezuela is no longer an independent country in the usual sense. It has become a survival laboratory where Russia and China are testing new financial and military weapons in preparation for an all-out confrontation with Washington. Russia, a steel shield in America's backyard. Look at how Russia shows up in Venezuela. When Washington declares that all options are on the table, including military intervention, Russia's strategic Tu-160 bombers suddenly land in Caracas. That is a direct slap to America's Monroe Doctrine, the doctrine that treats the entire region as its own inviolable backyard. But Putin does not help Maduro out of kindness. Russia sees Venezuela as a strategic chess piece. First is military deterrence. Russia needs a forward base right next to America to answer NATO's eastward military expansion. Whenever the US squeezes Russia in Ukraine, Russia reminds America through military advisors and arms contracts in Venezuela. Second is energy brokerage. When Venezuela is sanctioned, Russian oil giants like Rosneft jump in. They do not just extract oil, they help Maduro launder it. Ships smuggled crude through dark ships to sell into Asia. Russia earns enormous profit while controlling the energy valve of one of the most oil-rich countries in the world. For Moscow, Venezuela is an endurance test, how to maintain an allied regime under maximum US pressure without firing a shot. So far, that test has shown some encouraging results. China. The pocketing strategy. Building an empire through debt. If Russia is the military shield, China is the financial lifeline. While the US uses the stick sanctions, China uses the carrot cash. Over the past decade, Beijing has poured more than $60 billion into Venezuela. This is not non-repayable aid. It is a carefully calculated form of debt trap diplomacy. Venezuela repays with crude oil. That means even if Maduro is sanctioned in dollars, he can still trade oil for goods, necessities, and social control technology from China. But more important than money, China is using Venezuela as a laboratory for a non-dollar financial system. Beijing encourages Maduro to settle in renminbi. They help Venezuela build an international card system, a digital tool to distribute food, but in reality, a big data social surveillance system. China wants to prove that a country can survive trade and run society without any American technology or currency. And if this model succeeds in Venezuela, China will sell it to the entire developing world. That is how they quietly undermine the foundations of the American empire. A proxy war fought in numbers. Stay alert and recognize this: Venezuela is the site of the largest asymmetric conflict of the 21st century. America shoots Venezuela with treasury sanctions. Russia answers with S-300 air defense systems and elite forces like Wagner to protect key figures. China answers with cross-border payment systems outside SWIFT to neutralize Squid. They are turning the suffering of Venezuelans into statistics inside a geopolitical laboratory. Every time a US sanction fails to topple Maduro strategists in Moscow and Beijing smile, they are learning how to become immune to American power. Venezuela is where the idea of a multipolar world is being shaped with flesh and blood. If Maduro eventually falls, it will be a defeat for Russia and China's ambitions. But if Maduro somehow survives, it will still be living proof that America's era of monopoly dominance is gradually ending. The bitter truth. The pawn has no voice. Where are the Venezuelan people in this game between the world's bosses? The bitter truth is they are hostages. Washington is willing to let Venezuelans starve to spark a rebellion. Russia and China are willing to bury Venezuelans under crushing debt to preserve an anti-US foothold. None of them truly cares about freedom or bread for the people of Caracas. They care only about their position on the global power map. We are witnessing a shift in the current of history. Venezuela is no longer just the story of a South American country. It is a death bell for the old order. When empires begin using a country as a laboratory, it means a larger war is drawing very near. Do not look at the pawn, look at the hand moving the pieces. Remember, in geopolitics, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. But that friend can also be the one placing new shackles around your neck. Russia and China do not save Venezuela out of fraternity. They save Venezuela because they do not want to be the next one dissected by America. They are building a dark alliance, a parallel order, where the US dollar no longer has value. So what is the lesson? If you only look at street protests in Caracas, you are being distracted. Look at the trains carrying gold and oil from Russia to Venezuela and back again. Look at oil extraction contracts paid in renminbi. Look at renowned Russian military experts guarding the oil wells. That is the real game being played. And in this world, if you do not understand your position, you will forever remain a pawn sacrificed on the banquet table of empires. Welcome. You have taken one more step toward the light of truth.